with better, with better compliance. So why is stormwater permitting and compliance so important? And I know probably I'm speaking to a lot of people on this call, probably I'm speaking to the choir. But what you see here on the left, a standard stormwater inlet next to a parking lot is a very common sight. We see hundreds of them throughout our towns. But what we rarely look at is where does that water go? And this is actually an on-the-ground actual connection between the stormwater inlet on the left and the stream system on the right. That stormwater goes into that stormwater inlet and goes down into the woods, and it's out of sight, out of mind. But what's happening every storm event, as you can see on the right, slowly and surely it continues to erode away, eat away. All that dirt and sediment is going downstream to someplace, a lake, into a stream system or out into the Delaware estuary, or wherever you are, if you're not in this watershed. But you can see it's causing havoc, and that's environmental damage. It's in public safety and health damage. So one reason is that with better stormwater permitting and compliance, we can try and arrest this sort of issue. And other reasons why permitting and compliance are so important is the obvious flooding that that's caused by stormwater runoff and accelerated erosion and that sort of thing. According to NOAA, flooding is the most common and expensive natural disaster in the United States, costing the nation more than $845 billion in estimated losses from floods and hurricanes and hurricane-related disasters since 2000. So this is a massive price tag from stormwater issues and related flooding issues. And of course, it's the impact on our local communities, on our local businesses, and downtowns. When we do an ineffective job on stormwater management and compliance with our MS4 permit and the topics and issues that addresses, we have a direct impact on our local small businesses and our local downtowns, which affects us all. And of course, it costs us infrastructure funding too. I mean, all of the localized flooding, stormwater overflows. As you can see on the picture on the right is a sewage overflow, and this is in the Newton Creek watershed, and it's not the only creek system, but stormwater and sewage water find their way into the same pipe and then overflow. And so now you have sewage coming out into your streets, into your backyards, into your creeks. All of that is very costly, not only in tax dollars, but environmental impacts too. And the image on the left, you can see how it impacts infrastructure like roadways and the like. And of course, recreational opportunities and opportunities for contact sports or just exploring. Not only kids, but adults like to do these things too. But as the stormwater has a negative impact with stormwater runoff, flooding, sewage overflows, the chance of activities that we see here on this image are less likely to happen. So here is page 1 of the New Jersey DEP's MS4 Tier A permit renewal outreach, their presentation just given a couple of days ago. And as I said, it's really an exciting time because they're going through a public they're getting ready to go through a public comment period. When this draft comes out, they'll be seeking everyone's input. And it's so critical that the folks on this website or on this webinar and your friends and colleagues get actively involved in this, because it's voices from the community that can weigh and help direct DEP to make sure that the new permit regulations coming out are as stringent and protective of our communities and our natural resources as possible. And it's so important because on the other side, part of this process is it also seeks input from the Home Builders Association, engineering firms that represent municipalities, and many other entities that are looking for not so strong and not so protective of a regulation, so that they move forward slowly, be a little bit more protective, but maybe not go as far as, you know, the community would like them to do. So it's very important that we each take a real active role. And as having registered, anybody who registers, the folks on here tonight and the ones that have registered that weren't able to make it tonight, we'll make sure you get notified, because the process right now is DEP is seeking input from some community, from some stakeholders. Once they have that information and those comments and recommendations, it'll then go out to the rest of the community, the general public, and that's when we'll notify you through the registration information that you gave us tonight, and you'll know when that is, and there'll probably be a 90-day period where you'll be able to make a comment on. So it'll be very important. So it is an exciting time, because this is an opportunity that we can keep pushing the envelope, keep insisting that we become more and more and more protective of our resources, our downtowns, our small businesses and the like. As I said, this is the timeline from New Jersey DEP, from that same PowerPoint. Where we are now is on the top line, third position from the left, considered feedback from pre-draft outreach. So there's a pre-draft rule, and they are getting a little bit of feedback from some of the stakeholder groups. Excuse me. And they're going to be issuing that draft in late spring of this year. So it could be any week now, and late spring could be early June for DEP. So at that point, as soon as they issue that, it'll be in the New Jersey Bulletin, but the Delaware Riverkeeper Network and Clean Water Action and other groups will certainly have our hands on that and make sure that everyone on this website be informed, so you can get involved too. In the permit, this is the kind of the table of contents in the permit that we'll be talking about tonight, and will be coming down the road, is each of these topics in the new MS4 plan, the MS4 permit, there'll be a watershed improvements plan. There'll be improvements to MS4 infrastructure mapping. And I'm not going to read all of these, but you can see from the list, it covers all of these topics. And we'll go into a little bit more of this detail as we talk through tonight. But this is the breadth of information that is covered in an MS4, in the MS4 rules. So the first topic that I wanted to cover, I mentioned, was the Stormwater Pollution Prevention Plan. And the Stormwater Pollution Prevention Plan is a series of forms and standard operating procedures that summarizes how your town is going to be complying with the MS4 permit. These are standard plans. DEP prepares and provides a fillable template that each town can just fill in the information as it pertains to their community. But you can see that this is it's going to be created, and they need to reflect the 2023 permit conditions. So your town will be updating your stormwater pollution prevention plan. This is another opportunity for a concerned citizen, either or a group, environmental commission, sustainability team, could be any other community group that maybe you belong to a church that has an environmental club, or a high school that has an environmental club that knows there's a flooding problem in town. You know, this is a great opportunity to make sure your voice is heard, to ask, and to be sure there's every opportunity to, how can we address the flooding in our community, in our downtown, in our football field, or in our church basement in this part of the community? How can revision of the stormwater pollution prevention plan reflect those problems and be more proactive? We don't want this to just be a plan that sits on the shelf with community input. It can reflect some real world your town issues, and it's an opportunity for you to make sure your voice is heard in that regard. Again, this kind of gives more in depth. This is the table of contents, so to speak, and this is the an example of the pollution prevention plan from Haddon Township. But you can see from the list, you know, it had each town, you have your plan has a team. And in this plan, it'll tell you who those team members are. I mean, that's an important piece of information. That way you can reach out to them and make sure, again, you're working to make sure your voice is heard, and that it's good to know that information. And I'll go over each of these. As I said, there's some repetition throughout this presentation because there is some overlapping in each of these. And so I'll go into each of these topics in a little bit more detail as we go along. One of the elements of your town's plan to comply with the MS4 is through public education. And public education can come in a variety of different ways. The solutions to stormwater pollution flyer that you can see in the middle of this image, that's a standard. It was created, I believe, by New Jersey DEP, but many towns have this exact same thing. It's just, it was provided by the state and says, if you put this out a certain number of times every year, you're going to meet your public outreach and public education programming. And for that, you get points. There are MS4, there are actually points under this program. So a town will get 1 point for doing a flyer, you know, in their water department mailer, bill mailer. But what we all can do as a community member, we can do more. We can, as the image on the right-hand side shows, I mean, if a environmental club from school, or your environmental commission, or you have a watershed association, you do community educational programs too. This is a perfect opportunity to reach out to your municipal stormwater coordinator and talk to them about, look, we're bringing in even more education than what's required. And wouldn't that be a good thing to add into our annual report, which we'll cover in a few minutes. But just to bring more to the table. And I believe many times you talk to your stormwater coordinator, your elected officials, your Department of Public Works or streets department directors, and you talk about who are responsible for reporting and doing these things, and you're under the permit, you're bringing something to them. You're bringing an added value, added resource to them. And again, it can be part of building a relationship with them, which is what you're hopefully going to get out of this, out of this effort. A part of each of these, the plan itself is talking about good housekeeping. And that's an important, it's an important term, because in all of our Department of Public Works maintenance yards or in street departments yards. These are work areas, but there are good housekeeping measures that each has to take to make sure that the environmental impact from their stormwater runoff does not impact local waterways. You can see the image on the right, and that's, I know this site, this is just water, but it's very clear that there could be oil, there could be degreasers, could be antifreeze, and each town is required under your stormwater pollution plan is to follow certain best management practices, BMPs, on your municipal maintenance yard to adhere to good housekeeping techniques. And this is all part of compliance with your stormwater, with the stormwater permit. The image on the right was a town where there was not good housekeeping measures, and the street sweeper in that case was being washed right over top of a stormwater inlet that went right down into a creek. And you can see that all the sediment and who knows what kinds of nasty things that the street sweeper picked up just got discharged right down into the street. So understanding what those BMPs, the good housekeeping BMPs are, building a relationship with your Department of Public Works and Streets departments, and being proactive can prevent or has an opportunity to prevent the impacts that we see on the right. This is a new aspect of the MS4, the new MS4 rules, is that each municipality is now going to be required to carry a lot of this information on a dedicated website page on their town's website. What we found over these last couple of years in doing this, these MS4 webinars, some municipalities had this information already on their website, which made it easy. Anyone could go and get the pollution prevention plan. Anyone could look at the MS4 outfall maps and infrastructure maps that that are part of compliance, but also part of the community's ability to understand how is stormwater being managed in my town, and where is it working, where is it not, where is maintenance required, that sort of thing. Some towns didn't have that, so it would require you, I'm sorry, I must have taken it would require you to go to and file an OPRA request, an Open Public Records Act request, and asking for this information, which could be, it can be laborious at times and time consuming. But now, under the new stormwater rules, one of the requirements will be every town with a Tier A MS4 permit now has to have a dedicated web page with all of this information available to it. So it's more of an open process, which is fantastic. There are also under our MS4 permit, you can see, ordinances. These aren't new ordinances, but these are part of. Each of these ordinances have a potential for having either a positive or a negative impact on your local waterways, from stormwater events and flooding events. Whether it's pet waste, how is pet waste required? What's the ordinance in your community? Wildlife feeding, litter control, improper disposal of waste, and the like. All of those are ordinances, and they're highlighted in the pollution prevention plan. And it might ask, when was the last time the yard waste ordinance was updated, and you might find that it wasn't updated until, I don't know, 2001, 20 years ago. And you might think to yourself, well, maybe how we manage our yard waste 20 years ago is significantly different than how we should be handling it today. Municipal composting facilities might be available now or possible now. There could be neighborhood composting facilities, all sorts of different things, how to, litter control and that sort of thing. How do you better manage that? If your ordinances are old, in the pollution prevention plan, it'll tell you when it was done. Maybe you take a look at that yard waste ordinance that wasn't updated since 2001, and you take a look at and you find out, well, what is a good yard waste ordinance? What does that look like? And you can compare the two, and you look at it and you take it to your elected officials and you go in, why don't we implement this? Why don't we put this into process? And you can be an active part of changing that ordinance and updating it to what's the newer thinking and the newer science. So that's another way that you might take a more active role in it. And the same with the bullet number 2 is there's a lot more concern and a lot more understanding about the impacts of road salt and how we manage road salt storage. So again, there's a lot more information out there today than there was maybe even 5 years ago. So if your ordinance wasn't updated since 2017 or 2016, again, it's an opportunity where concerned citizens or an environmental group or environmental commission might take an active role.
Fred, that's really good to know, because I recall even when I moved out here where I now live, I was looking at some of the ordinances and I was comparing it to some of the ordinances from where I lived, and there was a marked difference in just, how property owners were held accountable. So that is a very good research skill that many of us that want to be active in our communities can go ahead, and that falls in line with, like you mentioned, about getting the Oprah requests, also looking at what the ordinances are. And we had a question that was, how can we hold commercial trash collection companies accountable for both leaking hydraulic fluid and trash blown from the collection process entering the stormwater system? So you were talking about, the trash and the ordinances, and now you're going into street sweeping. So I thought maybe you would have something to offer for that.
Well, we had something similar maybe 2 years ago where a trash truck in my town was driving, and he had hydraulic fluid leaking from his truck, and yet he continued to collect trash. And so going up and you could see on the townships or on the neighbors' Facebook, people are saying, my God, and was reporting this all along the way. And before you know it, people started calling the municipality because that contractor has a contract with the town. And in this particular instance, we had the Department of Public Works chair drove out and stopped the truck and had them take it back to their yard, stop collecting trash from the streets and go back. And what we were told is that it's important to let the municipality know that you're unhappy. In this case was hydraulic fluid. It could be where they're just sloppy and they don't do a good job at cleaning up. They dump the trash and stuff's blowing away. That has an impact when there's wording in their contract about doing an adequate or a good job, and there's also it builds a record up for when the next contract is due. If that private contractor is not doing a good job, and there's good documentation on file that they haven't been doing a good job, it could impact whether they get the next contract or not. That's how I would answer that.
Thank you.
I'm going to keep going. All right. So here again, street sweeping is part of the MS4s. What's interesting here is the first bullet is, the timing of how frequently your town has to do your street sweeping. All depends on whether the stormwater inlets along the streets, whether they discharge directly into your streams or whether they don't directly discharge into your streams. What that would mean is that if they had a collection system of some sort. So the one is annually, if it does not drain into surface waters, to the creek or stream that's going nearby. If they don't drain there, then annual sweeping is only once a year. If it does go into the local stream, then they have to do it 4 times a year. And you can see the rationale is just you don't want those sediments, you don't want those pollutants to reach the stream. So if it does drain to the stream, then you just clean it up quarterly and not once a year. And stormwater drain inlets here, this is just trying to, what's requiring is because the idea is to keep trash out from the stormwater systems, from the piping reaching the local stream or reaching the lake, wherever it's going. These new stormwater inlets, what you see here on the left, have smaller slits, smaller openings so that trash can't get down in there. And this new part of the MS4 rules is requiring that these either get retrofitted, meaning an old style an attachment is put on there so the slits are smaller, or they're all replaced with these new ones that have the writing and the small slits and the writing right on it. So that's what this has to do, excuse me, with the stormwater inlets, the storm drain inlets. And this is a little bit on the de-icing. I think this is real exciting too, because we're recognizing the serious impacts that chlorides and salts from road salts is having on the aquatic life in our local streams, the water quality and the aquatic insects and frogs and other animals that depend on healthier waterways. There's so much chloride and salts getting in there. And one of the big problems, and we all recognize it and see it in the wintertime, is many times you'll see the rock salt truck will come to a stop, and before he takes off, he could leave pounds of road salt right there in a pile, like you can see here, this image on the right. And the new excess de-icing materials management permit section is addressing that. And so you can see that in order to be compliant with your MS4 permit, you have to remove piles of excess rock salt. You have to remove it within a certain period of time. And here again, knowing that these aspects are part of your town's permit compliance, it's something that is important, because if someone's out, if the rock salt driver's driving around, that's an important job that he's doing. He's a frontline worker that's dropping this material off, making the road safe so people can go to work or school or whatever, and so they may not spot this, but as a community member, knowing that this is an important part of compliance, but more importantly, it's more important to the health of our local streams. this is something that can be, you could ask, how is this being implemented in your town? Can it rely on a community member picking up the phone and calling DPW and saying at, 4th and Lombard, there's a pile of salt there, and it puts it on their radar so they can come back and clean it up. But it's a way to actively participate in these kinds of, I'm going to call this a good housekeeping process. And another more stringent part of the rule is how when towns do creekside maintenance of clearing of either invasives or trees and that sort of thing, there's a proper way of dealing with it. And like the image you can see here on the right, this was only a few years ago down in Camden County, and you can see that this would not be in compliance with the new roadside vegetated waste management program. Plus, this is actually was a violation of DEP permit, DEP land use regulations too. Storm drain inlets and catch basins. Again, these are part of the infrastructure where our stormwater goes and drops down into those grates that you see. And a lot of that sediment and pollutants that are in stormwater will get captured down there. This aspect of the MS4 permit is how frequently they have to be checked to make sure that they're not like jam-packed with sediment and other stuff, trash and other things, and how frequently a town has to maintain them. And you can see from the second bullet, if you have 1,000 catch basins, if your town has up to 1,000 catch basins, you have to check them every year. And over 1,000, you have to do, inspect 1,000 or 20% of the total, whichever is more. So again, these are documented. This information has to be documented by the municipality in their annual report, which we're about ready to transition over to. It talks, how frequently are you monitoring them? We looked at them 4 times in June and found, 45 pounds of this, and we checked in 4 times in July and found 30 pounds of this, and that documentation is all put on record, and that's publicly accessible. And I believe under these new rules, that information, I know that information will now be right online, that you can find out how much of this contaminants from stormwater runoff your town is collecting and removing. Another aspect of it is not only the publicly owned stormwater basins. This is an image of a stormwater basin, but it's not only the publicly owned ones, but the privately owned ones. Even though homeowners association or a small one might be owned by the neighborhood organization, the municipality has to be aware of and monitor if they're still being is still effectively managing the stormwater. A lot of times these will get clogged by sediment, by invasive plants, that sort of thing. And no one pays attention to it until they're overflowing and causing problems downstream or in the adjacent community. So one of the things that the municipalities has to do is to not only monitor this, but then they have to use a GIS, a handheld GIS system, and create a map of where these sites are and when they were inspected and what the condition was on each inspection. And all of this is going to be mapped on a GIS map, which will be on that same municipal website. I just mentioned this. So this is, each town will be required to create that the map of all the infrastructure, whether it's privately owned or publicly owned, whether it's a rain garden or a swale or a traditional basin. That'll all be in that digitized map, and it will be available to you. And it's a great opportunity if you are familiar with a basin that is not functioning the way it should. Maybe it's got a cracked, maybe it's got a broken riser pipe, a piece of the concrete infrastructure that's part of that. You can let people know about that, and you can look at it. When was it inspected last, and what was the condition then? If you're concerned about sedimentation of a lake or a pond at the bottom of the hill, it could be a good exercise to look at that infrastructure map and look at the basins and the infrastructure upstream, and when was they last inspected? What were the conditions when they were last inspected? Maybe going out and taking a look and field testing and field land truthing that, and make sure that the most recent information, what's happening in real life, is what's being reflected on that map. This is an example that in a watershed near me, we noticed that this is a concrete riser pipe in a basin, and you can see that the part of the concrete wall was broken out because the whoever broke it out didn't want the water to sit in the basin and go up that high before it overflowed into the standing pipe. So they broke it so it drained into the creek. It didn't function as it was designed. It didn't meet the water quality standard that it was designed to do. Excuse me. And they broke it out. And so this was an issue that was brought to the town. It was also brought to the DEP, and a metal plate was put over that broken piece, so that it would function, function as designed. But again, this is, it's a privately owned basin. It would be one that you'd want to make sure that, was being accurately not classified, but accurately identified and meeting the design function on that GIS, on that mapping system, so that if you go out and you see something like this, you check the website and you check the map, and to make sure that, well, when was it inspected last? How did this get past the inspection? Or maybe it was recently done and you just raise people's awareness and try and get this fixed so that it complies not only with the permit, but it also protects the resource downstream. Another part of the MS4 permit will be illicit discharges detection. This is like illegally connected and malfunctioning basins. So you can see here is, let's see. Yeah, if you have, again, this is a numbers driven monitoring for during dry weather inspections. Again, up to 100 municipal outfalls inspect every year. If they have over 100 outfalls, again, it's 100, you inspect 100 or 20% of the total, whichever is more. And again, this is just to make sure these important parts of our stormwater infrastructure are working the way they're supposed to. And again, I think that the men and women that are monitoring these, are DPWs and streets department and others, they're on the front line and they're doing a good job. It's just good to know for us all. It's good for us to know what is being expected of our municipalities to be in compliance with these MS4 permits, so that we are part of the checks and balances system. And again, I think that most towns are going to do a very good job, but it's good to know that there's some checks and balances there too. Here, this is an example of an illegally connected drainage system from a residential property. You can see where the image on the right is just is a pipe that comes off of somebody's roof, and they're trying to shortcut the system instead of having it go on their yard where it could percolate down into the ground as it's supposed to. It goes underground, and on the image to the left, you can see where it came down along the sidewalk, and it goes right in, and underground they connected it to the drainage system, the town's drainage system. And so that's an illicit connection. And this sort of thing, knowing that is illegal, it makes it so the town's not in compliance, but it's also taking and draining, it's shortcutting the water quality design of when they put that development in, and that water was supposed to be going back into percolating into the ground, and it's now not. So that's an important bit of knowledge, knowing that sort of thing is illegal and it should be reported. So that's completion of how the breadth of topics under the new MS4 draft rule. I'm going to go into the annual report and the supplemental questionnaire, and I will finish up quickly.
Right, real quick, I'm sorry to interject. We had a private stormwater basins question.
Sure.
Is there a rule that makes stormwater basins be cleared from vegetation and mowed? And then can they have trees to help lessen the stormwater through the trees drinking the water? Or is it considered a liability because of leaves that could possibly clog the system?
It's a good question. If left unattended, vegetation can grow and sediment can collect in those basins. Vegetation can grow, trees can grow if left unattended and poorly maintained. That's not a good situation. On the other side, on the other hand, there's a whole industry built around what's called retrofitting a traditional stormwater basin, where you do with a plan and with technical expertise, you do exactly that. Is you put in trees, you put in some shrubs, you let some native grasses and plants grow in order to filter out some of the sediment that comes into a stormwater basin. It's called retrofitting, and it's creating a water quality basin out of a traditional detention or retention basin. So it's like any infrastructure, it's going to require maintenance. You can't build these things and then walk away. Roads can't do that. Our homes, you can't do that. So if you did plant trees, we're talking with a homeowners association in North Camden now about putting some trees, putting some shrubs in, letting some grasses grow to do exactly that. But there's going to have to be a maintenance plan as part of that basin. There's always, whenever you put in a basin, the developer always has to produce a plan, have a plan. This is how you maintain this basin. A basin we're talking about with plants and vegetations, raking the leaves, making sure that the accumulated trash and leaves are freed from the outfall pipe and things like that. So it's definitely a good thing because you're creating a living filtering system that prevents some of the pollutants that are in stormwater runoff from reaching the creek.
Right.
So I'm going to quickly go into the annual report. And again, there's going to be a lot of repetition here. My goal is, because there's under the new MS4 rules, there's not going to be any difference in the annual report that a town has to submit. And they submit it March of every year. So right around now, they just did. They're submitting their MS4 annual report. And again, and also with the supplemental questionnaire that we'll talk about in just a second. They're the same, and they cover so much. They cover all of the same topics: the street sweeping, the road salt, the ordinances, all of this. This is the town's way of telling DEP every year, this is how we complied. This is how we complied with our MS4 permit and this is how we followed our stormwater pollution prevention plan. And so all this is an image. I think and this will now this was now going to be online, maybe not for 2021, but maybe 2022 will be online. Your annual report for your town may already be online. If it's not online, you can do an Oprah request to the town and ask for a copy of it, just for your own education, and find out what information they're sending to New Jersey DEP. This is how I got one of the, this is just an Oprah request. But like I said, with the new requirement that it goes online, in the very near future, all this information is going to be available. You don't need to submit an Oprah request for your annual report, supplemental questionnaire, and that sort of thing. So this is, this slide is almost out of date. Again, this is how in the annual report, to reiterate, it talks about these are the programs that these are the projects that we engaged in to meet our public education program and outreach. And you can look at and see what the town submitted to DEP, and you can say, but we held our environmental commission or our environmental club from the high school. We did we held a watershed awareness day at the block party. And so why shouldn't that go into this reporting process? And, to make it so that your town, I think that the value is not that DEP is seeing it. The value is that all the people that are part of this annual reporting process, and it has to be signed, by the stormwater coordinator. You can raise it in public comment at your municipal meetings with the elected official, maybe even the planning board. Raise this up every chance you get, just so that you're taking full advantage of this opportunity to make sure that everyone's recognizing how important stormwater management and compliance with the MS4 and reducing runoff going to your streams. Take every advantage of that. And this could be just one other way of showing that, here's a community member, here's a community group that's concerned about these issues, and we're doing something about it. This again has to do with ordinance, and I think I can see that we're near closing time, but so I'm going to jump through these next couple of slides, because again, they're repetitious, but this is, again, in the annual report, this is how they deal with community-wide ordinances. And in this case was how you dealt with yard waste. And if by walking through your town and being familiar, that residents aren't composting their leaf debris, they're dumping it down the embankment where it's falling into the stream. That's not proper disposal of yard waste. And it says so right in the ordinance. So again, as a concerned citizen, you can take this information and start putting it into action and finding out what should these homeowners do to properly manage their yard waste. You know, bagging it and putting it into the street is the answer, or creating your own backyard composting pile. The answer is not dumping it down the embankment where it flows into where as it biodegrades, nutrients and sediment is being delivered to the stream and the lake downstream. Outfall pipes, these are, the GIS mapping where every outfall pipe, which is what you see on the left, where a stream comes out of a pipe and goes into the, goes back out into the environment. This is that outfall pipe on the left is being shown on the right on the map. That's what it looks like on the map. And again, it may look a little foreign to you if you're looking at this, but if you lived on Elgin, I'm looking at the map. If you lived on Elgin Avenue or Melrose Avenue or Utica Avenue, you would know, most likely you would know, I know exactly where that stormwater outfall pipe is. Let me go take a look at it and see what kind of condition it's in. This one actually was not in good condition, and we utilized this information to go and get work done on this. So the Gabion baskets, which isn't ideal anyway, but get the Gabion baskets repaired. I'm going to keep going. More outfall pipes, more outfall pipes. Has the municipality, I have it circled, has the municipality completed the mapping of the MS4 outfall pipes? And they said, yes. Now this was but this was also from this was from 2020's annual report, and you can see when was it completed. 2005. They said, yes, we did it, but it's like 15 years old. And you look at the outfall pipe on the left and the outfall pipe on the right, both of them, even a layperson would look at it and say, that doesn't look like it's in good condition. It looks like every time it rains, more erosion is happening, that sediment's going someplace. Knowing that, you can raise this issue, raise the concern, as Aubrey likes to say, the clarion call, make that call to your public officials and say these outfall pipes are causing ecological damage, probably causing flooding downstream, if not in your town, the next town below. And, and it hasn't been inspected since 2005. This is about good housekeeping. I'm going to keep going. This is just, again, this is transitioning. This is the final document. There's only a couple of slides on this, and again, it's repetitious, but each town not only has to fill out the annual report every March, but they also have to go into a little bit more detail in what's called the supplemental questionnaire. And this, again, is information that is available to all of us, our towns. We can ask for the completed and signed supplemental questionnaire, and it's repetition, but it goes into a little bit more detail about how your town is complying. So it would be valuable to get that. I'm going to go through. You can see these are the topics that are addressed in the supplemental questionnaire, and you can see employee training. Each of your municipal officials have to be trained in stormwater issues. Employees too need to be trained, receive training from there, and it's all there are webinars just like we're at tonight. Yard maintenance, again, they'll I'm going to keep skipping since it's repetitive. These are scour and erosion. You know, again, this is, you know, are they inspecting these? You know, what's, and if you know of an outfall pipes that either looks like the one on the right or the one on the left, these are issues that you want to raise. And having the supplemental questionnaire and seeing what the answers are, it can add credibility to your advocacy. More scouring sites. This is a wet, and this is the same spot. Once during the storm, and once during, you know, after the storm event. You can just see the environmental impact that poor stormwater management has. And so each of these, if these issues aren't addressed in the supplemental questionnaire or the annual report, it's a perfect opportunity to bring these to the attention of the appropriate stormwater coordinator or others in your town. So in conclusion, wrapping up, you can see this is where we're at. DEP is in the process of pre-draft review. We are, like I said earlier, like I said in the beginning, once the draft permit is issued to the public and seeking public comment, you'll be notified, and we'll be looking for ways. We'll be looking for each group, each individual to write a comment letter to DEP. And as an individual, or as an environmental commission, or a community group, a church group, you have a lot of weight, much more than an organization that is an environmental advocacy. If you belong to if you fish in a stream, or your kids fish in a stream, or your church basement is being flooded, or your streets are being flooded, and during storm events you and your neighbors can't get in and out because of high water, that's important information that can be based, that you could use to share in your comment on these on the new rules, because you know there will be groups on the other side of the coin that are looking for less protective rules. So we need to be a loud voice in pushing for as protective rules as we can get. And that I'm going to close with that. I really appreciate it. And I'm open for more questions.
Fred, thank you very, very much. This was a lot of information, but it was very helpful information. And I think what we can immediately take away from this webinar is that we need to be accountable, and we would like to hold those that are in position accountable as well, right? So we could start with foundational work, making sure that we clean up our own properties and make sure that our streets are cleaned, and that we're making whatever necessary reports if we see something that's out of order. Then the other thing is taking the time and doing the research for our ordinances, trying to find out what our cities, our townships are saying with regards to our stormwater management practices and other environmental issues. Then the next thing is, if we don't have the knowledge and the understanding on our own, that to do the research and actually get it, file the OPA request, look at the MS4s and the annual reportings. One of our last questions was, can we use these slides for our advocacy? And if yes, do they require attribution to the source? So I'll let you answer that before we close, Fred.
Well, we are recording this webinar, and that's going to be made available to everyone. So I think if it's, I would say yes, as long as there's, there's the acknowledgement that it's part of the clean water, our upstream, downstream project. I think it's good, and it can be, and if there are parts of this slide that you find useful and you had questions, you wanted to make sure you understood how to explain it, to pass that information on. My contact information is here you're more, we could spend a few minutes on the phone going over that.
Thank you, Fred. And I also put my information, my email information in the chat, so that if you had any more questions that you couldn't think about this evening, you can email me and we will send that information to you. Another question was about the best practices in the ordinances. And I said that we would, you and I, Fred, will look into that and we will send out whatever we find to those that have registered. Shannon Pendleton said, thank you for an incredible presentation. So we appreciate everyone for taking the time. We do apologize for going our 10 minutes over, but we thank you for hanging in there with us. And at a later date, you will all receive the YouTube link. And I hope that this information has been very, very helpful to you. Have a good evening. And thanks again, Fred.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Thank you, Aubrey.
Bye-bye.